Welcome to Hungarian Insights, your go-to channel for exploring Hungary's rich history, vibrant culture, and language learning resources. Did you know that the earliest Hungarian literary texts weren't even written in Hungarian? Today, we're diving into a world of funeral sermons, saintly legends, humanist poets, and epic battles, all woven through the incredible evolution of medieval Hungarian literature. From Latin manuscripts to the printing press in Buda, we'll uncover how this rich period laid the foundations for a national literary identity. Ready for a journey through time? Let's get started.
Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about medieval Hungarian literature. So we're talking about that period from the 11th to the 16th centuries. We've got a bunch of encyclopedia entries and literary histories we're going to be drawing on, to kind of guide our exploration.
Okay.
And just to kind of throw out a fun fact right at the beginning, did you know that before the 15th century, most Hungarian literature was actually not even in Hungarian. It was in Latin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So that's something where we're going to kind of dig into. Why was that the case? And how did things change?
Well, I think to understand that, we have to think about the context.
Right.
So the establishment of the Christian kingdom in the 11th century is a really key turning point.
Okay.
And so you have a society where the church is incredibly influential.
Right.
It shapes religious life, but it also shapes scholarship, official record keeping, all of that.
It's the center of everything.
Exactly. And Latin was the language of the church. So it makes sense that it would become the language of power and knowledge.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously, priests and monks are going to be the ones writing in Latin. But were there any, everyday Hungarians who were fluent in Latin?
Yeah. So there were individuals called diákok, which essentially meant educated people.
Okay.
They weren't necessarily priests or monks, but they were literate and often served as scribes, notaries, administrators, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So really played a crucial role in crafting legal documents, translating religious texts, spreading knowledge.
So those are the people who are kind of bridging that gap
Yeah,
between, the official Latin and then the everyday Hungarian.
exactly.
It's really fascinating to see how language can reflect power dynamics in a society.
Yeah,
Like who gets to use which language and what that means.
for sure.
But amidst all this Latin, did any Hungarian manage to kind of sneak onto the page?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we have two really remarkable examples from this early period that really give us a glimpse into the development of written Hungarians.
Okay.
The first one is the Halotti Beszéd, or the funeral sermon, which was discovered in something called the Prayer Codex.
Okay.
And it's thought to be from the late 12th century. And this is the oldest surviving Hungarian text.
A funeral
A
sermon.
funeral sermon.
Huh. That's not what I was picturing when I thought of the earliest Hungarian writing.
Right.
What kind of insights does it offer into the language and the culture of the time?
It's a real treasure trove, I have to say.
Okay.
For example, the word that they use for grave is completely different from the word that Hungarians use today.
Oh, well.
So, this shows us that even fundamental concepts, were really in flux at this period.
Interesting.
And also, it's not just some text that scholars are poring over.
Right.
This was likely spoken aloud during funeral rites.
Okay.
So it gives us a glimpse into, everyday language and beliefs.
Yeah, so it's how people were actually speaking and thinking at that time.
Exactly.
That's incredible. Okay. So what about that second example you mentioned?
Yes. So the second example is the Ómagyar Mária-siralom, or Old Hungarian Mary's Lament. And this is a really poignant poem from around 1300.
Okay.
And this is considered the earliest surviving Hungarian poem. And it's actually a translation of a Latin hymn.
A translation. So even in its early stages, Hungarian literature was already kind of engaging with and reinterpreting existing traditions.
Right.
That's interesting. So what does this poem tell us about the influence of religion on early Hungarian writing?
Well, it really highlights how intertwined religion and literature were at this time. This Ómagyar Mária-siralom showcases the emotional power of religious themes.
Right.
And you can see this growing desire to express these themes in the vernacular, in the language that people actually spoke.
Okay, so we've got these two intriguing early examples, but I'm guessing things didn't stay quiet for long. What happened next in the evolution of Hungarian literature?
Well, hold on tight, because the 14th century is where things really take off.
Okay.
This is a period marked by a real burst of creativity under the Anjou kings.
Ooh.
Various literary forms start flourishing.
An explosion of creativity.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. What kind of genres were like gaining popularity at this time?
Well, for one, we see the rise of chronicles.
Okay.
Those detailed accounts of historical events. The Keep's Chronica or the Illustrated Chronicle is a prime example.
Okay.
And it's not just text. It's filled with these vibrant illustrations
Oh, cool.
that really bring the history of the Hungarian monarchy to life.
Oh, wow.
It makes it more than just this dry recounting of facts.
Right. It makes it like a visual experience, too.
Exactly. We also see hagiographies emerging.
Hagiographies.
Yes. Those are the tales of saints.
Okay.
So, imagine stories about figures like King St. Stephen, St. Imre, St. Ladislaus.
But they're shaping the very like identity of the nation with these stories.
Exactly.
So it's not just about like recording history.
Yeah.
It's also about crafting these narratives that shape how people understand their past and their place in the world.
Exactly.
I'm sensing a theme here.
You're catching on. And then alongside these chronicles and hagiographies, we also have theological works developing.
Okay.
These are works that really delve into complex religious discussions.
Okay.
And thinkers like Paulus de Hungaria were making some really significant contributions.
Okay.
He wrote a work called the Summa de Penitentia, which is a comprehensive manual for priests on the sacrament of penance.
Wow. So it's like we're seeing different like branches of knowledge kind of developing with their own like sets of literary conventions.
Yeah.
Were there any like technological advancements that fueled this literary boom?
Oh, absolutely. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Paper becomes more readily available. The use of the Gothic cursive script becomes widespread. And this leads to this surge in book production. And here's a real game changer. In 1367, the first Hungarian university is established in Pécs.
A university.
Yeah.
That's a pivotal moment.
Right.
Because suddenly knowledge is not confined to like monasteries and the elite.
That's the example.
It's opening up to a wider audience.
Yes.
Were there any other changes in the 14th century that kind of influenced how literature was produced and consumed?
Well, the rise of humanism in the late 14th and 15th centuries, really marked a significant shift in intellectual thought.
Okay.
This renewed focus on classical learning and human potential.
Yeah.
And this really had a ripple effect on literature. It inspired writers to explore new ideas and forms of expression.
That's intriguing. It sounds like humanism was like a breath of fresh air, kind of challenging those existing norms, pushing those boundaries.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And one figure who really embodies this spirit is Janus Pannonius. He was this humanist poet whose Latin verses gained recognition throughout Europe. His elegies, his epigrams, panegyrics, they weren't just like technically brilliant.
Yeah.
They really delved into these themes of self-awareness, homeland, the beauty of the natural world. He did it with this incredible wit and insight.
But wasn't it a bit unusual, though, for a humanist like someone embracing these new ideas to stick with Latin?
Right.
What does that tell us about, like, the literary landscape at the time?
That's a great question. Well, humanism, championed the individual and their potential. Latin still remained the language of scholarship.
Right.
And international discourse.
It's how you got your ideas out there.
Exactly.
To a wider audience.
Yeah. And so for someone like Janus Pannonius, who was seeking a wider audience, engagement with that classical tradition, Latin was still the most effective tool.
So even as these new ideas emerged, the old ways kind of held their ground, at least for a while.
Right.
But what about Hungarian? Was there anyone championing the use of the vernacular in literature?
Oh, absolutely. This is where Balassi comes in. He's considered the first classic of Hungarian literature. And there's a reason for that. He was a real pioneer.
Wow.
In composing poetry in Hungarian.
Okay.
Really proving that the language could be just as expressive and powerful as Latin.
Okay.
For conveying these complex literary ideas.
That's a huge step. It's almost like he's giving Hungarian literature like a voice of its own.
Exactly.
What kind of themes did Balassi explore in his work? Was he influenced by humanism at all?
His poetry was remarkably diverse. He covered love, war, heroism, religion, faith.
Wow, the whole range of human experience.
Exactly. While he might not have directly embraced, His experimentation with form, his compilation of the first edited poetry collection in Hungarian, all of that really reflects this shift
Okay.
towards a more individualistic and expressive approach to literature.
So it's like he's taking those seeds planted by humanism.
Yeah.
And he's cultivating them in, like, the soil of Hungarian language and culture.
Precisely.
That's fascinating. But let's not forget about another major development that was transforming the literary world at this time,
Yes.
the printing press. How did its arrival in Buda in 1472 kind of shake things up?
The printing press was a game changer.
Okay.
I mean, think of it as like the internet of the time.
Oh, okay.
Right. But instead of instant access to information, it's this sudden ability to produce and disseminate books on a scale never seen before.
Oh, wow.
Right. Knowledge, which was once, confined to these manuscripts copied by hand, suddenly becomes more accessible, more affordable.
So instead of like, a handful of scholars huddled in a monastery, you've got books circulating more widely, reaching new audiences.
Exactly.
That must have had a huge impact on literacy and just the spread of ideas.
Absolutely. And it's no coincidence that the first book printed in Hungary was the Budai Chronica, a historical work.
Oh,
The printing press really allowed for the wider dissemination of these historical narratives,
interesting.
shaping national identity and creating this shared sense of the past.
It's amazing how technology could just like reshape the way we engage with knowledge and stories.
Yeah.
But what about the role of monasteries in all of this? Weren't they still important centers of learning and literature?
Absolutely. Monasteries were vital.
Okay.
For preserving and transmitting knowledge, especially, as we see this transition from Latin to Hungarian gaining momentum. They weren't just about prayer, right? These were places where scribes would meticulously copy manuscripts, preserving ancient texts, and also producing new works.
So they were like the guardians of the literary tradition, kind of making sure that knowledge wasn't lost amidst all these changes.
Exactly.
Did they play a role in translating the Bible into Hungarian?
They were instrumental in those early translation efforts. You have the Hussite Bible, which is a partial translation from the mid-15th century, and then the Jordansky Codex, which is a nearly complete Bible translation from 1519. These were monumental undertakings.
Wow.
And monasteries played a key role in these projects.
That's incredible. I mean, imagine the dedication and the skill it must take to translate such a complex text. Did these translations have like a significant impact on the development of the Hungarian language?
They were incredibly influential. I mean, by translating the Bible, these pioneers, not only made religious texts accessible to everyday people,
Right.
but it also helped to standardize Hungarian grammar and vocabulary. They had to grapple with these philosophical concepts and literary styles, and this really enriched the language itself.
It's like they're building a bridge between the sacred and the everyday, using language as the foundation.
Yes.
But it wasn't just biblical translations, right?
Right.
Were there other types of religious texts being written in Hungarian?
Yeah, you have writers like Karthauzi, Neftalin, and Utodi András. They were composing sermons and prayers in Hungarian,
Okay.
really bringing religious thought closer to the lives of ordinary people.
So it's like alongside these grand historical narratives and theological discussions, you're also seeing a more intimate and personal side to literature kind of emerging.
Exactly. And it wasn't just limited to religious texts, There's this wealth of codices or handwritten books from this period that contains secular stories, love poems, humorous tales, historical narratives.
Oh, it's a real, like, vibrant and evolving culture.
Exactly.
Were there any other, like, significant developments in the 15th and 16th centuries that kind of shaped the trajectory of Hungarian literature?
Well, I think we can't talk about this period without mentioning the arrival of the Renaissance in Hungary during the 15th and 16th centuries. This was a real golden age for literature.
Ah, the Renaissance. I mean, that word just like conjures up all these images of great art and flourishing of ideas.
Exactly.
So what were some of the hallmarks of like a Hungarian Renaissance literature?
Well, we see this real surge in works that embrace humanist principles,
Yep.
celebrating human potential, exploring individual experience, engaging with that classical learning.
Right, right.
And writers were really eager to showcase the beauty and richness of the Hungarian language, proving that it could stand shoulder to shoulder with Latin
Okay.
in terms of its eloquence and sophistication.
So it's like Hungarian literature is finally like stepping onto the European stage.
Exactly.
Confident in its own voice, its own identity.
Yes.
Were there any particular writers who like really embodied this Renaissance spirit?
Well, one standout figure is actually someone we've already talked about, Balassi Bálint.
Oh, okay.
He's often considered a bridge between the medieval and the Renaissance periods.
Interesting.
You know, his mastery of Hungarian verse, his exploration of these diverse themes, love, war, religion, patriotism, and his innovation in poetic forms really just exemplifies the spirit of the Renaissance.
It's really interesting how one person can like embody this pivotal moment of transition. It's like they're looking back at the past, but also pushing forward into new territory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were there any other notable figures from this period?
Another significant writer is Janus Pannonius.
Okay.
He was known for his translations of classical works into Hungarian.
Okay.
And so his efforts to make, ancient Greek and Roman literature accessible to a wider Hungarian audience were really crucial for spreading humanist ideas and enriching the language with this new vocabulary and literary techniques.
So it's not just about creating these original works. It's also about like translating. It's about making the knowledge and the wisdom of the past accessible to a new generation.
Exactly. Translation plays such a vital role in cultural exchange and the evolution of literature. And speaking of evolution, we can't overlook the impact of the Reformation on Hungarian literature. This was this huge religious movement that swept through Europe in the 16th century. And it had a profound influence on how writers engaged with spiritual themes and expressed their faith.
The Reformation, a period of just like immense religious and social upheaval.
Absolutely.
How did it impact the literary landscape in Hungary?
Well, it led to this surge in religious literature written in Hungarian.
Okay.
Hymns, sermons, theological treatises, and one prominent figure from this period is Gaspar Karli.
Oh.
He was a Protestant pastor and writer, and he played a key role in translating the Bible into Hungarian, developing the standardized Hungarian literary language.
So just as the monasteries played a vital role in like preserving and translating texts in the earlier centuries, now during the Reformation, we have these religious figures stepping up to make religious texts accessible to a wider audience.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about spreading religious teachings. It was also about shaping a distinctly Hungarian Protestant identity. The Reformation had a profound impact on the development of the Hungarian language, contributing to its standardization, enriching its vocabulary.
So again, we see how literature and language are so closely intertwined with the social and religious transformations happening.
Absolutely.
But beyond religious text, were there other genres that were popular during the Renaissance?
We see this real flowering of various literary forms, poetry, drama, prose. And one genre that really gained prominence was the lyrical epic poem.
Okay.
Often celebrating these historical events, these legendary heroes.
Lyrical epic poems, they sound so grand and dramatic.
They are. And one notable work is the Szigeti Veszedelem, Peril of Szigет, by Miklós Zényi.
Okay.
He was a 17th century military leader and writer.
Okay.
And this epic poem recounts the heroic defense of Szigetvar against the Ottoman Turks, a really pivotal event in Hungarian history.
So it's a work that blends history and heroism and poetic artistry.
Exactly.
To create this powerful narrative.
Yes.
That speaks to national pride.
Right.
And this memory of a valiant struggle.
Exactly. It's the stirring example of how literature can capture the spirit of a time.
Right.
Weaving historical events and legendary figures into a tapestry that celebrates courage, resilience, and the enduring spirit of a people. And as we conclude our deep dive into medieval Hungarian literature, it's clear that this period laid a rich and fertile foundation for the centuries that followed.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of language, the enduring allure of stories, and the boundless creativity of the human spirit.
Well, that was quite a journey.
It was.
From Latin sermons to printed chronicles, Hungarian literature sure covered a lot of ground.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder, how did these early works still speak to us today? What echoes of these medieval themes, these styles, can we find in modern Hungarian literature? That's something to ponder.
Our podcast discussions are based on our ebook, Hungary's Hall of Fame in a Nutshell. History, literature, art, music, science, sport. Scan the QR code or check the link in the description to download your copy of Hungary's Hall of Fame in a Nutshell. As a special bonus, you'll also receive the Illustrated Companion, featuring over 100 detailed illustrations to visually enrich your understanding of the book's content. Thank you for watching.